Good afternoon, and welcome to our webinar, TRu Multi-Touch Monitors, Redefining the User Experience through Projected Capacitive Technology. Today's webinar is the 8th in our Beyond Brand series, intended to introduce you to the new product lines and vendors that Computime has partnered with during this past year. My name is Joshua Levey, and I'm the CEO of Computime, your trusted source for sales and channel distribution. For those of you who have joined our previous webinars, you know that this presentation is part of a series designed to educate our customers, ISVs, distribution and channel partners about our expanded multi-touch monitor, e-signature hardware and software, and display tablet product lines. This series has proved to us that there is still a great need for information on integrating new and innovative technology. Before we begin, I'd like to take a minute to thank our marketing partner, CMS Solutions. They've done a great job marketing and recruiting attendees for our webinars. And a very special thank you to our video partner, Fat Chimp Studios, who is helping us to bring a higher quality video representation for playback after the completion of the presentation. Our presentation focuses on our Projected Capacitive, or PCAP, TRu Multi-Touch Monitor products, and the technology, industries, and applications as well. It will last approximately 45 minutes and promises to get your company on its way to integrating the right solution for you. Are you familiar with the benefits that multi-touch displays and applications can provide to your organization? Smartphones and similar devices have redefined the way we interact with technology and have created a new set of consumer expectations. This has opened us up many opportunities to use touch in new and exciting ways. As application development accelerates, more companies are making the switch to multi-touch for a more engaging, intuitive user experience. Have you ever considered how you will meet the growing demand for multi-touch? The purpose of this informational webinar is to help you understand Projected Capacitive, PCAP technology, how end users, system integrators, and content providers are using it, and also provide an overview of the TRu Multi-Touch Monitor product line. TRu Multi-Touch Monitors are used by system integrators and content providers across many vertical markets. They want to make the leap to multi-touch applications. The TRu Multi-Touch product line has a range of desktop and open frame multi-touch displays ranging in size from 15 inches to 32 inches. In addition to that, this presentation will also get you thinking about the possibilities of multi-touch, how PCAP enables new capabilities, plus ways it solves problems that you may not have even thought you had. PCAP touch panels with multi-touch capability take some of the control of your keyboard and mouse and put it on your screen. This helps to provide defined gestures, allowing the user to perform functions like manipulating photos, scrolling through documents, and panning across maps without mouse or typing various commands on a keyboard. Computime provides a wide range of services, including high-tech sales and consultations, distribution logistics, asset management, post-sale support, and marketing services. Our goal is to minimize the time it takes to get product in your hands. We've built and managed a large and diverse technology distribution channel of resellers, end users, and distributors worldwide, mostly with a focus in the e-signature capture space. The TRu Touch monitors, manufactured in Xiamen, China, are a great fit for our channel. So at this time, I'd like to introduce Gene Halsey, our guest presenter and strong advocate for projected capacitive touch displays, touch systems, and touch monitors. His focus will be more on the technology itself and is one of the most well-known people in the touch space. Gene is the general manager for TPK Display Solutions, and TPK is the world's largest manufacturer of projected capacitive touch systems. With more than 17 years of expertise in the touchscreen industry, Gene has worked closely with many of the industrial market's largest OEMs to bring the intuitive multi-touch experience of today's hottest consumer devices, you know what I'm talking about, to the vertical markets. Known for being a creative, forward-looking individual, Gene sees tremendous growth potential for multi-touch applications in 2014 and beyond. Prior to TPK Display Solutions, Gene spent more than 15 years with Touch Revolution and Aptera Incorporated in a variety of product management, sales, and marketing roles, which included servicing as the Director of Marketing and Sales for Aptera Technology, which is Aptera's former joint venture operation with TPK as well. Gene has been a strong advisor to Computime, offering training, knowledge base, and integration support. So without further ado, I'm turning over the presentation to Gene. Gene, thanks for joining us.
No problem. Thanks for having me. I mean, it's been great to work with Computime, and the excitement that the Computime team brings to what they can do with the TRu Multi-Touch Monitors is pretty exciting. So we'll spend some time walking through what Projected Capacitive Technology is, but first, a little bit of background on who TPK is. TPK is the world's largest projected capacitive solution manufacturer. We've got about 13 million square feet of manufacturing space in Xiamen, China, more than 53,000 employees. And without going through all the details on that slide, TPK is all about delivering world-class solutions to world-class companies. And that's what we're trying to do, and that's what we're excited about what Computime has to offer with their TRu monitors and in the enabling of that projected capacitive into those product lines. If you look at the state of the touch industry, a lot has happened in the touch industry. Touchscreens have been around since the early 1980s, so the touch industry has been there for a long time. But touch has simplified the interactions that we have with technology. Touch in and of itself has allowed for more accessible interfaces to information. That's the crux of what touch does. But we're moving away from what we call poke touch, or the notion of having buttons on a screen that I just go up and I select those buttons or poke the screen with one finger. We're moving away to more of a gesture-based interface, what we use with our phones every day, right? I mean, we know how to swipe things, we know how to resize things. We're getting used to manipulating information in a different way than just having buttons on the screen. And those consumer devices are defining that experience now for us. And you're starting to see those expectations now move away from the consumer devices. They're moving into some, I'll say, non-traditional spaces. For instance, the car I'm driving around St. Louis this week has a multi-touch interface in it. Now, you can argue whether it's good or bad that a car has a multi-touch interface in it, but the fact is, you're starting to see this move into some other industries.
And Gene, I think we could summarize the gesture into a term: pinch and zoom.
Yeah, pinch and zoom.
Pinch and zoom, swipe.
And those are just some of that's kind of the tip of the iceberg of what you can do with gestures. And we'll talk about it throughout the presentation, but there's so much more going on that, now if I can put 5 fingers on a screen or 10 fingers on a screen, what other gestures can I create? What other unique things can I do? Can I create wheels on a screen that with 5 fingers on and I turn does something? Can I have some tactile feedback? Can I do other things with a multi-touch interface that I couldn't have done even 3 or 4 years ago? When you look at two industries, and this is what we spend a lot of time thinking about, obviously the left-hand side is consumer applications. Those are what we're used to doing, pinch and zoom, just like you said, right? I mean, we know how to take a picture, we know how to make it bigger, we know how to make it smaller. We know what those interfaces are like. And on the right-hand side with vertical applications, we know what those look like as well. They're typically, in this case, a point-of-sale screen with a lot of buttons on it and a keypad. Very much two disparate industries, but both that touch is at the core of what they do. So how do we redefine those? How can multi-touch change those interactions? So we do some what-if things. These are kind of my dreamy slides. These are the what-if or why not kind of slides. So if you look at the supermarket, I mean, we all know what it's like to go through the supermarket and you go through the checkout stand and you need to figure out what produce. I can never remember what produce. I couldn't tell you a Gala apple from a Granny Smith, from a Honeycrisp, whatever, right? I can't remember that, but I have to somehow either have the number written down or remember exactly what I bought. Well, why can't I change that interaction and now put a map there? I can remember where on the shelf I got something, but I can't remember what the name is. So what if I put a map in that and I zoom through a map and I go in and I select what I picked off the shelf? Is that a different way? Is that eliminating one of the frustration points for people in a shopping experience? Or the next one, what about the classroom? When I studied chemistry in high school, I studied on the left-hand side. And if I was going to draw out a molecule, it was C, 2 lines, H. And if I had to figure out how to break things apart, it was all in 2 dimensions and all on a piece of paper. Why can't we make that 3-dimensional? Why can't we create 3D models? And now we can manipulate those models with multi-touch, and we can look at, what does it look like when you separate a molecule apart? What happens? It's a much more immersive experience for the student. Or in the department store, a classic one. If I go into the hardware store and I'm looking for blinds, I've got to pull all these different catalogs off the shelf. I pull them down and I'm flipping through them trying to find the things that I want. Well, why can't I turn that into 2 monitors up like this, sitting apart from each other, and I want to take and I can swipe pages back and forth between those? Or if I see something that I like, why can't I select it and have it go on to the other display, and it shows those blinds now in a picture of my house, and I get representations, I can zoom in, I can do different things. You can't do that if you just have the flat 2-dimensional paper on a catalog.
And I would say that from a Computime perspective, we'll go further into why Computime chose TRu, but this slide alone, given Computime's rich history in e-signature capture and emulating pen on paper with solutions, this slide hits home for Computime from the standpoint of it's emulating paper applications in the electronic world, and the touch monitors clearly allow you to do that. So talk a little bit about what is that user experience.
Well, everything we just talked about boils down to the user experience, right? It's why do people love their phones? I think people love their phones because it's a great user experience. I mean, there was plenty of people before the iPhone came out that said this was going to be, this was going to be the product that finally killed Apple, right? It wasn't a particularly good phone. It was difficult to use. It wasn't the Razr phone that was the rage the year before, right? And it turns out that it completely changed the mobile phone industry, and that was all about that user experience. And again, without going into the details of this slide, there's so much work going on in this space and UX studies that are out there. And I think this gestural multi-touch interface is a core tenet in what we can do when we talk about the user experience in terms of technology and our interaction of technology.
And let me interrupt too. If you have questions, please submit those throughout the presentation. We'll be happy to try to get them throughout the presentation, as well as address those questions at the end. But we're going to flip through some slides that are just rich with information, and if it sparks a question, just please submit that question via the chat window on the GoToWebinar.
So before we leave that slide, I mean, the last point, the quote at the bottom, and I won't read it word for word, but the notion, and this is a gentleman that we've worked a lot with in terms of the UX space, the notion of gestural interfaces being a natural representation of what we do in terms of normal communication, right? We interact with our hands, we talk with our hands. I talk with my hands for sure.
Yeah, for those of you who can't see Gene, he's talking with his hands.
There you go. So, I mean, but that's what we do, right? So the learning curve when you've got gestures and technology is a lot slower than it is, or a lot faster than it is if you've got to teach someone what to do. So that's the notion. If we can make those interactions with technology simpler, think about all the other rich things that we can do. So when we design for multi-touch, we talk about a holistic mindset a lot. We talk about the notion of not just looking at, okay, I'm going to buy a multi-touch monitor, I'm going to hook it up to a PC, and now I've got a rich multi-touch experience. It's not that at all. It's the notion of putting all of these things together. Who's going to use it? If I'm going to design a system for the 18 to 24 demographic, it's going to be very different than the 60 to 75 demographic. What industrial design? How am I going to integrate it? What pieces are going to go? How is it going to sit in a case? What system hardware? If I put a lot of real heavy, intensive graphics into something and I've got multi-touch there, now I got to make sure that when I actually interact with that data, it responds the way I want. And that's nothing to do with the multi-touch hardware. It's the system hardware that you pick, right? The graphics card, the PC. What operating system am I going to run in? How am I going to design the application? And how do I make that touch? Again, we talked a bit before about gestures. What gestures do I want? How do I write those into my applications? If I look at this on the front end and I think about it holistically, I deliver a much better, much richer experience to the end user when it's all said and done. So a question I get asked a lot as I do these talks and different conferences is why multi-touch? I get a lot of people that say, okay, Gene, you talk about checking in at the airport, and I fly a lot with Delta, and Delta's application is still very much a single touch application. So why multi-touch? Why should I change that? And I think there's a couple, we've got 3 slides in here that talk a little bit about that. And first and foremost, I think it's a customer expectation thing. I think as people become more and more used to their phones and more used to that interaction, when you go up to, if I'm a retailer and I've got a kiosk in the store and I walk up to that kiosk and I see something that I like on the screen and I go to make it bigger because I want to see the detail on it, right? They spend a lot of money on photography. I want to see that detail and I try to zoom in and it doesn't do it. The first thing I'm going to think is, I must have done it wrong. I must not have both fingers on the screen. I try to do it again. If that screen doesn't behave the way I want it to, I'm going to get frustrated, right? And I'm not going to get frustrated at the guy that made the monitor, the guy that wrote the software, the guy that built the kiosk. I'm going to get mad at the retailer. Why can't the retailer present information to me in a way that's meaningful to me? This is what I expect from technology. So there's real negative connotations that are going to come down the pipe as this becomes more and more commonplace.
And then, Gene, for the CFOs out there and the tech rich, you got to have some ROI on multi-touch versus single touch.
And the slide that's up now really talks about that. So it's a notion of Pixar and Cal Berkeley. They looked at how fast can you select targets on a screen. And the blue line, the top line, is a mouse-based system. Then you've got a single touch and a multi-touch system. And I think it makes sense to people that from a mouse-based to a single touch system, there's a big reduction, right? It's a lot faster to use a touch. But what they found was there was another 27% reduction going from a single touch system to a multi-touch system. So think about it. If I'm a retailer, if I'm a cash out or a checkout lane, and now I can get people, let's not even say I can get them through 27% faster. What if I can get them through 10% faster? That's real dollars, right? That's a real ROI that has to do with multi-touch, that has nothing to do with pinch and zoom.
So you have consumer expectations in the first example. You've got an ROI on speed of interaction, and then just the overall experience for the education type of example.
Yeah, collaboration, right? The notion here, another piece of research from University of Sussex, that if I gave a single touch system and a multi-touch system to a room full of 3rd graders, right? And I look at the time that things were spent on various activities. When I went from a single touch system to a multi-touch system, what happened was the second bars from the left, that's turn taking. So that the amount of time that was spent taking turns when you went to multi-touch system and you and I could be interacting with it at the same time, all that time went on to task-based work. So a classroom, an office, a museum. Think about the places that collaboration really could take hold.
A more efficient learning environment and a more efficient workplace. Some advantages.
So right, we talk a lot about multi-touch, and certainly that's the crux of what we're talking about in the webinar today, but there's a lot of other things that PCAP brings. The accuracy, it is the most accurate technology that's out there today. Durability. All of the electronics in a PCAP system are hidden behind at least one layer of glass. There's a reason you can drop your phone, right?
Right, rewind one. So when we talk multi-touch, is that synonymous with PCAP, or is PCAP a type of multi-touch?
PCAP is a type of multi-touch technology. We think it's the best type of multi-touch technology. It's the fastest type of multi-touch technology, but it isn't the only multi-touch technology that's out there.
And so for our audience out there, PCAP is the technology that Computime has chosen for the TRu monitor line, and it's important to know that the difference between single touch and multi-touch, and then the difference, we're talking about the high-end type of multi-touch.
Right. You're talking about that type of technology that if you deploy it in the field, it's not going to wear out, it's not going to break down, it's going to deliver what your system. I mean, we're in the vertical markets, right? We're in that industrial space. Uptime is everything, and PCAP really can drive uptime.
And I interrupted. Explain to our audience where the sensors and why it's so.
Right, so durability-wise, everything in a PCAP sensor, all of the electronics are behind at least one layer of glass, right? So they sit behind a layer of glass, so I can scratch it, gouge it, chip it, dig it. I can put that thing out there, and it can look like the most beat-up screen in the world, but it's still going to work. I mean, again, go back to the notion of dropping your phone. There's a reason it still works. That's a big deal until you can get that field tech out there, to replace the damaged screen.
Absolutely, and more advantages.
Calibration. All the calibration is done at the factory, and we've got things in our ICs and our sensing algorithms now that take care of any calibration issue. So in many types of technologies, single touch technologies that are out there, calibration is a big problem. And then users having to recalibrate screens is a frustration point, and PCAP addresses that and removes that.
You're not going to steal my thunder when we get to the products, but talk a little bit about the flush mount and the ability to clean.
This is my favorite one. I think the industrial designers love PCAP. The ability to bring a completely flush glass surface from, if it's a kiosk, from sheet metal down to glass, back to sheet metal, and all in plane with each other. I think there's some tremendous industrial design things that you can do. And then you talk about cleanliness. The medical guys, they love the cleanliness aspect. The notion of getting rid of that plastic bezel and all the places that junk can gather, yep. Right? You can get rid of that with PCAP and having that glass surface. So we put this together. It's an eye chart. We won't spend a lot of time on it. There's 2 points that I want to make on this chart. One is that there is no perfect touch technology. It's hard to believe that I've been doing this 17 years, but we've looked at different technologies over the year, and there is no silver bullet. We just happen to think that projected capacitive does more things well than any other technology that's out there. There's a lot of double green checks on this slide compared to other technologies.
Absolutely, and as you'll see, more green and double green check marks, and Computime feels the same way for some monitors, that projected capacitive is the right way to go.
So just a couple of wrap-up things. What has projected capacitive changed in the vertical markets? It's changed our interface expectation. It's changed the way that we think about what that user experience can be. It's changed our industrial design expectation. It's changed how many people can use a screen at the same time. And it's changed what our durability expectations. We know that we can put those screens out there for 5, 10 plus years without an issue. But what other things could PCAP change, right? Can it change that efficiency, that notion of multiple or 27% faster selection, right? Can we get our machines to be faster? How much more revenue can we get per machine, right? If we've got more compelling user experiences, can we get more people using our devices? Uptime, talked a lot about uptime and durability, right? That's a huge piece of it. And then final system form factor, that industrial design, we can make it look really different from what it's looked like in the past.
And what does the future have in store?
Who knows? It's a hard slide, but what's going to happen with gesture interaction? What's going to happen with voice? What's going to happen with this Connect and this gesture base that's off the screen? How is that convergence of those 3 input technologies going to fit together? I think there's still a lot of question marks there. I think each has their place, and the notion of them working in harmony with each other instead of independently of each other gets pretty powerful. What's going to happen with Windows 8? Certainly that's changed our consumer electronics space. What will that do in the industrial or the vertical market space? There's a lot of open question about that. What's the convergence of devices going to look like? How do I tie my phone? I go into the store with my phone. How can I tie that now into a 21 or a 32-inch screen that might be in the store? And I want those to talk to each other. I want them somehow to be able to deliver the user experience between devices. And the only thing that I can be sure of is that what doesn't make sense right now is probably going to get on the roadmap somewhere. Again, who would have thought what the iPhone was going to do to our expectations? That wasn't on the roadmap 6 years ago.
Absolutely, and that will wrap up the first part of our webinar. And now I'll dive a little just on the surface of the products and give you more background to Computime's choice of TRu monitors and representing the kind of 3 subsets: desktop models, slimline, and open frame construction. It goes hand in hand with what Computime's been known for, carrying the best of breed models. We talk about signature capture and being known for that, and the transition into other technology with best of breed presentation and working with integrators. This is not, sometimes you don't think of it just as a monitor. There's a lot of SDK and development, and so it's the similar channel that Computime has called on in the past that we're reaching out to now with the product line. And we'll talk, unfortunately you're not in our offices to see a demonstration that we have that shows some of that content providers. But back to the products, the desktop models range from 15-inch to 21.5-inch size. Portrait, landscape, twistable. and has that non-bevel and beveled approach to it. So this has the PCAP technology and a wide range of sizes for the desktop models. The slimline models has that bezel-less display. I always think of this as just an oversized iPad or an oversized iPhone. It's very similar. The look and feel, the touch, the technology is very identical and very familiar with the consumers. The monitors are very robust, and I know when I say robust, I don't want to say they're too heavy, but in actuality, they're just made for industrial, high volume, high usage. Some new feature enhancements on the bezel-less is the 32-inch 10-touch model. The bezel has been improved by moving from a 1.1 millimeter cover glass that was enclosed to the bezel-free. This is just restating some of those wonderful things about the look and feel of the monitor. A lot of the open frame models, these are similar sizes, 15-inch to 21.5. When I show this slide, it quickly reminds me, and Gene kicks me under the table, we can make anything, any size, any dimensions. It just has to be the right quantities and a proof of concept, and we'll help you guys out with that. But the open frame is great for kiosks, great for kind of any real industrial applications as well. We've got several different configs for them with the power and 12 volt. And when we looked at TRu, and when we hope you look at TRu, why TRu? One, it's not a knockoff by any means. And when I think of overseas production, I quickly think about how the cheaper is better. Well, this is kind of the opposite. This is more expensive is better, and it is the furthest thing from a knockoff. This is the top line in monitors, and they're easy to deploy. They can plug and play for existing multi-touch applications. They have we have widescreen and standard models, and working with TRu and TPK has been very easy. And we want to take Computime's fulfillment capabilities and warehousing and inventory of the products and bring that much better easier to deploy the product. Clean industrial design, just some benefits, able to flush mount in wall or kiosk, durable glass touch surface, easily integrated into new and existing product designs, and like I said, we can inventory it here so you don't have long lead times on the products. Gene is showing off an application that it was done by Flypaper for us to show at a medical show that allows him to drag and drop and twist and turn the x-rays and heart monitors, and this is just an amazing healthcare application, and we're looking to find more and more applications out there. We know of developers that can take any hard control panel and turn it virtual. And so we've got, in fact, the webinar that we're running today is the control panel is on a TRu monitor with a virtual control panel. So that is our conclusion of the presentation, brief product overview. We want to open it up to questions and answers. Submit your questions in the chat box and we will take care of them. And I've got a first question here. How durable, Gene, is PCAP touch panels? How durable is it compared to other multi-touch? And I know you can't quantify durability, sure, but if you can give some examples.
The nice part about PCAP is it's a glass-based technology. So your touch surface on a PCAP is still going to be a very robust glass surface. And if I take all those electronics now and I bury them behind at least one of those layers of glass, I don't have to worry about damaging the electronics. A lot of the other technologies that are out there, single touch and even multi-touch technologies, you can do damage to the surface that'll impact how the screen works. With PCAP, you don't have that concern. You can still break a PCAP screen. I mean, you can go out there and you can break it, but the point being, it takes a lot more to break it than comparable technologies.
Good, so obviously our talk about the bezel was catchy with our audience. Can the touch screen monitor have a smaller bezel or go bezel free for, they're thinking multiple monitor configuration?
Yeah, that's where, that's one of the limitations of PCAP, right? Go back to the eye chart, right? There are some things that PCAP can't do, and PCAP needs a border. It needs the black mask that we've come to associate with that Apple-esque look, right? It needs that black border to hide all of its electronics. So while it would be beautiful to have a PCAP monitor that didn't have that black border where I could put two monitors up seamlessly next to each other, you can't do it because the guts of that PCAP system are all hidden behind that black mask.
And so would a custom approach, would a larger, how would you overcome a multi-monitor configuration?
You'd have to be willing to live with the fact that there's going to be some black mask between the image on one monitor and the image on the next. We can get that down to, depending on what size we're working with, a 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch. But there's always going to be a 1/2 to 3/4 on one monitor and a 1/2 to 3/4 on the next. So, an inch to 1.5 inches between those two things. Now, if you're stacking, in a trading floor, right? If you want to put those all up next to each other and one piece of information's on one and one's on another, that's not such a big deal. If I'm trying to show a video on 3 monitors on a video wall, having those gaps, that might be
Excellent. Our next question is, what is the advantage? You talked about the TRu monitors and the PCAP technology is not just taking a touch sensor and putting it on top of an existing LCD.
Right.
So what are the advantages of the integrated touch display as opposed to just a customer who tries to integrate their own?
With projected capacitive, you're dealing with such small signals. You're dealing with the fact that you're trying to capacitively couple your finger with reasonably low capacitance to some kind of screen. And that's very noise sensitive, right? So what's been done when you create a projected capacitive touch system, that whole thing is tuned. Whatever LCD you choose, whatever touch sensor you choose, whatever backlight configuration you want, whatever else is going to go into a cabinet, all of that's taken into account. And when that final solution gets put together, that's married in such a way that that thing behaves the way you want it to. There's nothing more frustrating than creating a touch system that when you go up to it, it doesn't work the way you want. I think about the first Nook that was out there when they put capacitive touch on the bottom of the Nook. And when you read those reviews those first few days, no one said anything about the number of books that Barnes & Noble had out there, how great a screen it was. All they said is, when I tried to swipe across the bar, it was slow. And that's all people could think about because it didn't behave the way they wanted it to. And if you try to do it by yourself, if you try to create that without that integrated know-how, that holistic mindset, and you deliver a bad experience, it's hard to recover from.
And there are members of our audience that want to know, what's the background? How does this technology work? Because I know at first,
people 60 seconds go.
Yes.
Basically, what you're doing is you're creating a series of an x-axis matrix and a y-axis matrix. So a series of rows, a series of columns. And then what we're doing is we're measuring the capacitive coupling between your finger and those nodes where the X and the Y intersect. And we've gotten over the years much better in how we do that so we can sense the nodes individually instead of sensing just the rows and the columns. A difference between self-capacitance and mutual capacitance, which has helped eliminate a lot of the ghosting and some of the artifacts from early projected capacitive days. But that's the basic idea, is you create this network. Think of a checkerboard, and I'm measuring the capacitance at every intersection of an X and a Y.
And from the signature capture pad, can a stylus work with the monitors?
Stylus can work with the monitors. It's limited to diameter of that diameter of the stylus, right? The fine point stylus is not PCAP strength, and if you go back again to the eye chart, input flexibility is one of the things that has a neutral for projected capacitive for that reason. But there are a lot of good styli out there now that you can use, and those diameters are becoming smaller and smaller by the day.
Great. And I think we have time for just one more question. The last question that we have time for, and our whole presentation was about this, but if you could just hit on a few more benefits of multi-touch and differentiate between multi-touch versus single touch for our users.
Sure. At the end of the day, multi-touch is about, I think of it as about future-proofing. Right? It's this notion of we don't know where things are going to go. So if I can get efficiency gains like we talked about with POS and how fast I can select targets. If
or the gaming industry.
The gaming industry. Or if you and I are sitting at a slot machine, right, for the gaming industry, and suddenly now we can both play a game, right? If there's a bonus game that interacts two people sitting side by side, if there's gestures you want to bring into an application, even if there's simple gestures right now, the fact that if you put multi-touch into that system, now you've got the flexibility to think 3, 5, 7 years out in terms of where the application can go. And I think, again, looking at how much has changed in the last 5 years, I think most of the customers that we work with are designing around multi-touch, because the idea of designing around single-touch technologies now and locking yourself into that technology for that 3, 5, 7 year horizon, that's a pretty daunting proposition, right? I mean, to say that you're going to be able to live with poke touch or single touch technology still 7 years down the road, that's a hard sell.
Yep, absolutely. And unfortunately, that is all the time we have. I want to thank all of our audience and for joining us today, and thank Gene as well. And as a follow-up to our webinar, tomorrow we will be sending out a recording and the slide deck that we just viewed, as well as answering questions that we didn't have time to get to. Again, at this time, I'd like to thank Gene, who traveled here from Holland, Michigan to St. Louis to join us in person in our studios for this webinar broadcast. Also, a special thank you to our marketing partner, CMS Solutions, for recruiting the attendees and putting together this webinar. And a special thank you to Fat Chimp Studios, who has done the video for the rebroadcast. We have additional webinars coming up in the month of October. Look for announcements on the Computime website as well as in your inbox. We appreciate your time. This has been a webinar brought to you by Computime.